Preschool for All starts next year, and by all, we mean less than 10% of the kids in need.
It's going to be difficult to make those choices, and it'll be hard to hear probably for some families.
And other people may also find it hard to hear that even if you didn't get a chance to vote on this idea, you may still be paying for it. And Oregon's COVID cases are trending downward pretty steadily. But it's a different story for the Black community in the metro area.
We're seeing Black and African Americans come in sicker and probably later in the course of their illness.
I think about so many people that look like me that might be their reality.
And we're always talking about getting to that 70% vaccinated, the magic number to reopen the state. My question is, why 70%? Here's the story.
I've been doing that little thinking emoji all day. Oh. Hi, I'm Dan Haggerty. Welcome to The Story. I'm going to want to hear from you tonight. I'm going to be saying some stuff, and I'm going to want to hear your opinions on the stuff that I'm saying. Your opinions on my opinions. And some, whatever, you get my point. All the ways to send those to me at the bottom of your screen. Use that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. You can reach out to us at thestory@kgw.com. On email, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, all that stuff. In the meantime, why don't we get to the big story? Now, look, when voters passed a measure called Preschool for All, they should have said, define all. See, it turns out the idea in action is a lot more complex than the sales pitch. And look, I know the saying, Portland voters never met a tax they didn't like, so it didn't surprise me at all last year when Multnomah County voters easily passed a measure that promised tuition-free preschool to everyone. But now here we are, 7 months later, and I'm wondering, how close are we actually to seeing preschool for all? Here's a hint. Kids who are in preschool now will be considering a college by that time. Morgan Romero has the story.
In one of the area's largest preschool programs, these kiddos choose how they learn. Pipster Prep owner Tessa Steinberg wants to give every kid the same opportunity.
We cost kind of what the going rate is to cost for preschool. And, it is hard. It's not accessible for a lot of families.
She's excited about the promise that quality education will be more accessible through the new Preschool for All program. The program was created when voters in Multnomah County passed a new tax last year that promised to cover preschool tuition for every 3- and 4-year-old in the county.
I'm hoping to obviously be one of the first providers to be able to jump on board, because it sounds like there's going to be a lot of support for the providers as far as helping us pay our teachers better.
Despite her excitement, Steinberg might be waiting a while before she sees any kids enrolled through Preschool for All. The first kids to benefit from the program won't see their tuition covered until fall 2022. And even then, the county expects to only enroll between 500 to 1,000 kids at first, out of an estimated 11,000 eligible preschoolers. After that, the program will grow incrementally until the end of the decade. The county estimates they won't have enough money to cover all preschoolers until 2030. Multnomah County Commissioner Jessica Vega Peterson championed the program.
And we have thousands of children in this county that don't have the opportunity to succeed. All of us as a community benefit from this long-term stable impact in preschool that's going to improve educational outcomes, economic outcomes.
The county's new preschool and early learning division director, Leslie Barnes, says kids who don't have any access to preschool will get first dibs.
It's going to be difficult to make those choices, and it'll be hard to hear probably for some families.
Preschools can apply this fall to participate, while families will apply early next year. Barnes says they're reaching out to providers now. But like every preschool owner I heard from, Steinberg needs more answers about how the program will work.
I believe in the overall mission of it, for sure. And I think that it will be a really good thing for our city. It's just a matter of working out all the logistics. Preschool for All will be paid for with a new income tax that started this year on high income earners. Joint filers making over $250,000 are taxed at 1.5%. Those making over $400,000 are taxed at 3%. The rates rise in 2026. People who make that amount and work in Multnomah County will get taxed, even if they don't live in the county. If the pace of the rollout seems slow, consider the logistics involved in creating a new tax. The county had to come up with a way to collect the tax. They're paying the city of Portland to do that. It also won't see most of the revenue from the first year until next April, when 2021 taxes are due. County economists consider the tax a, quote, volatile revenue source, since incomes go up and down.
The underlying economic activity that the tax applies to, it just tends to go up pretty quickly during economic expansion and go down quickly during recessions.
Over the next fiscal year, starting in July, the new tax is expected to bring in about $108 million. Revenue should rise to $147 million 4 years later. That's much less than proponents pitched to voters before putting it on the ballot. Much of the initial money will go to prep work this next year. None of it pays for kids in actual seats yet. The county also plans to hold some of the initial tax revenue in reserves for the future. As they add more slots, some years will be more expensive than others.
So this has been part of the problem the whole time. We're implementing what we're calling revenue smoothing, where we're collecting a little bit more than we need for any particular year in the beginning, but we're setting that aside for when we experience deficits later on.
In addition to covering tuition, the county also has to focus on growing preschool capacity. During the pandemic, Multnomah County lost about 36% of its childcare providers.
And before the pandemic, there was already a childcare desert.
Barnes says the county is investing in infrastructure and looking into ways places can expand easier.
What are the things that we can do to make those barriers go away?
Some providers worry the county is running out of time to grow the system before more kids enter it.
There's not enough spaces that have the correct occupancy to be childcare centers. All of our locations are usually full every year, and so it really would be finding additional space in order to grow.
Morgan Romero, KGW News.
And I do want to reiterate something for some people who I've talked to about this personally, and they didn't know that this all applied to them. So let me kind of reiterate it, as I said. Now, this is a tax on high earners who work in Multnomah County, work here, which could come as a surprise to some people who, let's say, live in Washington County or Clackamas County, but they work in Portland, because you never voted on this measure. Perhaps this wasn't even on your radar until now. Think of it this way. If you look at income, the wealthiest cities in the state, like Happy Valley, West Linn, Lake Oswego, all of those are outside of Multnomah County, but the odds are many of those wealthy people work in the Portland area, and that means you are paying a tax that you didn't necessarily get a chance to vote for or against. This is true for people in other states too, so people who live in Washington but they work in Portland, although those folks are used to this sort of thing. For the rest of you, welcome to taxes. This is how taxes work. All right. Let's look at some graphs. Let's go from taxes to graphs. People said, how do we hook viewers? I said, I want it to look like a good PowerPoint presentation. Now, this is a graph showing Oregon's daily COVID cases from the beginning of April until now. Now, we haven't really been showing you this graph recently, mostly because the numbers have been pretty good. They've been steadily going downward. You see that little spike in April. That's when we shut everything down again. But for the most part, they have been dropping steadily. That's not exactly the whole picture, though, because cases in Multnomah County's Black community are on the rise. Health officials say between April and May, African Americans were twice as likely to test positive for the virus and 80% more likely to be hospitalized than white people. They also say Black people are coming into the hospital with more severe cases of COVID. And with that, let's bring in Bryant Clerkley, our reporter working on the story for us today. First of all, what is the county saying? Why do they think we're seeing these spikes in cases?
Well, Dan, it's a combination of things. It's a combination of vaccine hesitancy, access to the vaccine, and not enough culturally specific outreach programs.
So people aren't vaccinated, basically?
Basically, yes.
All right. So what is an example of one of these outreach programs? How do they get specifically into these communities and make sure people are getting the shot?
Well, I just got an email a minute ago about an upcoming vaccine clinic this weekend at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. School. So that's a way that you get into communities and you vaccinate people. You go to them.
Right. Make it easy. It actually reminds me of a story we did a few months ago at Mount Olivet Baptist Church in North Portland, where they went into that community. They gave people access to the vaccine. They just had to walk down the street, essentially. And I talked to one person in particular who I think sums up the aspects of equity when it comes to this quite well. Let's take a listen to it.
Well, what I want to say is this right here. I'm old school. I'm 65, right? I truly don't own a computer. I got my phone, but you know what I'm saying? I truly don't have a computer set up in my place. I don't. And things has been so terrible for me because, my age, I'm 65. I should have been had the shot, if I could have gotten it. But, everything is, booked all the time. I just wasn't on time. Just my timing was bad, apparently. I miss stuff all the time. And I'm happy that I have family and friends that will talk to me and give me the right information that we need, because sometimes you need to hear it more than once. That's all that is, you know what I mean, from my perspective.
So Dan, these spikes in coronavirus cases in the African American community are directly related to vaccinations, because the latest numbers show only 37% of black people here in Oregon are vaccinated with at least one dose.
Got it. All right, Brian Clerkley, thank you so much. Appreciate the report. Now, why don't we count some vaccines while we're at it? According to the CDC, 2.39 million Oregonians have gotten at least their first dose, and that works out to be almost 68% of the state's adult population, 18 and up. The governor says when we hit 70% of that population, the state can fully reopen. We still need about 71,000 people to get vaccinated in order to hit that. Now, in Washington, the state is reporting 4.1 million people with at least their first dose. That's almost 67% of their state's 16 and older population. That's the metric that Washington is using. They're also aiming for 70%, but the governor says they will reopen by the end of the month no matter what. But then again, Washington has already reached 70%, according to the White House and the CDC. More than 70% of their adults 18 and up in Washington have at least one dose. But again, Washington, they don't want to use those numbers. They want to do it their own way. Instead, they're counting people 16 and up, which changes the math and keeps them closed. It's different from the way Oregon is doing it. So Washington and Oregon are on two different pages here. See, we're not counting 16-year-olds in our math. We're going with the CDC numbers. So, to summarize, Washington is still closed, but if they counted like us, they would be open. Instead, we're both closed, and I'm wondering why. First, why 70%? Exactly. Well, 70%, if you remember, was the initial number that we needed to reach for herd immunity. 70% of our entire population, not 16 and up, not 18 and up, everybody, every man, woman, and child, but then the variants started, and they were spreading more quickly, and scientists changed that percentage from 70% to somewhere between 80 and 90% of the entire population, which quickly became an impossible goal, considering that right now about 52% of Americans have at least one shot. In Oregon, that number of the total population, everybody, is about 57% with just one shot, and it's stagnating, right? People aren't getting the shot at the same as rapidly as they were before. Even less than half of us have full immunity. Does this sound confusing already? Because it is. And it also reminds me, when did we start going to the one shot as being the metric? Herd immunity is determined by full immunity, and in Oregon, again, less than half of us have both shots, less than half. So, look, herd immunity isn't a thing anymore. So again, why 70%? Well, because the president said so. He set a goal of 70% of adults with at least one shot by July 4th. Why? Simple. They explained this. That number was attainable, and people like goals. That's it. It was a tactic to get people vaccinated. We like finish lines. In the governor's latest news conference, someone asked, why are we, Oregon, using that same 70% metric here in this state? And they said, well, because of what the president said. When Governor Brown was asked, what if we don't meet that goal? Well, she didn't answer. Instead, she said that she's confident we will meet it. Classic. When someone asks you for a backup plan and they say something along the lines of, we don't need one. I like the confidence, but this isn't an 80s action movie. I'm actually interested in the contingency. So either they don't have a backup, or maybe we're just on a need-to-know basis. Either way, why 70%? What is the difference between 68% of adults, where we are today, and 70%? Other than half-open businesses, the number is arbitrary. Everyone is counting toward it in a different way. And the vaccine is easily available to anyone who wants it. No appointments, no wait, no cost. If you want the vaccine, you can get it. So why are we still closed or half closed or using restrictions? Why 70%? What are we actually waiting for? Let me know what you think. Send me an email. Give me your opinion on it. Send it to thestory@kgw.com. Find me on Facebook and Instagram, or use Twitter and the hashtag HeyDan. I see your email saying you want to see more of a crackdown on violent protesters. Well, a court just handed down the toughest sentence yet. And it's for the guy who set fire to a Portland police precinct. When the story continues. Welcome back. We always go through your emails and tweets during the show. Keep them coming. Use that hashtag HeyDan or email the story at kgw.com. I also want to remind everybody about this, our Hey Help campaign. This week, we're asking you to consider donating to the WYCA's Family Preservation Project. This helps support families involved in the criminal justice system, including children of incarcerated parents, mothers who are in prison, and caregivers. The program coordinates visits between families. They provide mentoring and help families after they leave the prison system to get back on their feet. To donate, just open the camera on your phone, point it at the QR code on your screen, and it will take you to a link to donate. You can also go to kgw.com/HeyHelp. And once you are there on that page, you can click this drop-down menu to select Family Preservation Project. And we're calling this a micro donation drive. So feel free to give any amount, no matter how small. Each week, we're highlighting a different nonprofit. So if you have an idea for an organization in need, email the story at kgw.com. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Portland's protests. It's been pretty quiet lately, don't you think? It hasn't been on the news a whole bunch. A lot different from this time last year when we were talking about protests and riots almost every single night for months on end. Well, just because things have settled down in the streets, it doesn't necessarily mean they've settled down in court. They haven't taken a break from prosecuting people who've been charged with these protest-related crimes, though the pandemic has slowed things down pretty significantly. Let's take a look at the numbers. To date, 1,108 arrests stemming from crimes committed at the protests have been referred to the Multnomah County District Attorney. 891 of those have been rejected. Remember, the DA is not prosecuting a lot of lower-level protest offenses, and that makes up a lot of those rejected cases. But they are prosecuting 194 protest-related cases. 28 cases are pending, and that means the DA's office is looking into those arrests, but they haven't decided whether to pursue charges or not. Lastly, a grand total of 9 cases have been resolved. That means only 9 people have been convicted of or pleaded guilty to the charges against them. A few weeks ago, that number was just 6, so I guess we're making some progress there, but I know what you're thinking. 9 cases out of more than 1,000 arrests. 9. Yeah, the reason for that, according to the DA's office, is that they have a big backlog of cases due to the pandemic shutting down parts of the court system. And something else to note, these are just protest cases in Multnomah County. There are also a bunch of federal cases to consider too. Now, of those 9 resolved cases, I do want to look at one that just came down that is pretty notable because of both the crime and the punishment. Almost a year ago, in June 2020, a man named Gavon Streeter Hillerish started a fire at Portland Police Bureau's North Precinct during a protest. He lit this dumpster on fire, then he pushed it against the plywood that was covering the windows of that building. There were 19 people inside at the time. Fortunately, none of them got hurt. Streeter Hillerish pleaded guilty to first-degree arson, and he got sentenced to 5 years in prison. And that is way longer than any punishment that we have seen so far. We asked the DA's office about that. They said, in part, the reason that the sentence was so long is because he also pleaded guilty to some other crimes not related just to that arson case. So the judge handed down a sentence for all of those charges together. We will continue to keep tabs on the other protest-related sentences and keep you up to date on what happens next. Meantime, I want to get to a story in the Oregonian that we think is worth your time. It's an update on the Portland Police Union negotiations that have been going on since January. As I'm sure you know, police accountability has been a big part of Portland's protests, and a lot of the activists think that the union protects officers from discipline. So far, negotiations aren't going too well. The two sides have been unable to reach a deal through the collective bargaining session, so they've moved on to mediation, which is something that the union requested. That also means that it's no longer public. So these negotiations, I guess, aren't really our business for a little while here as they talk kind of behind closed doors. We do know the city is trying to get the union to agree to some new reforms for misconduct and discipline. The union has proposed creating a body camera program, but with some stipulations, like letting officers who kill someone view the body camera video before investigators. We'll keep you posted on the negotiations, but in the meantime, check out this article in the Oregonian to get yourself caught up on the process. And send us some questions and comments. Let me know what you're thinking. I'm going to read a few just after this break. But first, no pride parade this year. No problem, as long as you've got a paddle. We're going to finish the story when we come back. Welcome back. I'm sure a lot of you know that it is Pride Month, but because of the pandemic, a lot of the usual parades and festivities and other in-person events have all been canceled. So some people decided to come up with a new socially distanced one called the Portland Pride Paddle. It's something that's happening this Sunday, and our photographer, John Gudgel, got a preview.
Here we go. I don't even have to pump it. I am the idea innovator of the inaugural Portland Pride Paddle, if you will. Put a flag on the back of my board. What kind of reinforcements do we need? I was out paddling and it was Pride and I'm like, I have no idea what events are happening. And I've been looking stuff up and I was like, we should totally do a Pride paddle down the Willamette and like celebrate Pride, get on the water. It's socially distanced. It's all the things. This literally came together like a week ago.
And we kind of found out about this like within the last 24 hours about a paddle, and we're like, let's do this.
It felt very Portland, and I was like, do we not have that yet?
We were thinking about it too, but we just never, we didn't call you guys.
This is gonna be the moment of truth. We're crushing it. For the goal is to paddle from Willamette Park to Tom McCall to downtown Portland, and ideally paddle back.
I like your shorts and that's great.
And so to wear something like this and to walk through a parking lot and for people to be like, woo, thumbs up, happy Pride. Like it's almost this thing that we get to celebrate together.
First of all, we're out here because we love the water. My bestie Pax has all these kayaks.
Gigi, she's a unicorn. You have to have one at a Pride parade.
Yeah, but we're like, we're dedicated to this, right, Pax?
That's right, we're promoting this Pride paddle for sure.
The event is June 20th. 11 a.m. is when we leave. Get on the water.
That's what it's all about.
It feels uplifting, it feels supportive, it feels like we're finally at a place where people feel celebrated for who they are and not shamed for who they are.
All right, hey, a couple of things. This is the ginormous QR code that we put behind me sometimes. This goes to our newsletter. So if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, it's kind of fun. Not everybody can watch us every night. So at the end of the week, we kind of summarize the biggest stories of that week and some of the stuff that we did that got some attention on the show. We'll send it to you in an email. So you still have to watch though, okay? If you're not going to watch, don't do it. Got a couple of things. Gary saying, hey Dan, the reason the governor set a 70% vax threshold is because that's what the experts at CDC, Dr. Fauci, they recommended. Maybe you could do some research before you go all Sean Hannity on us. Okay. So the CDC came to that conclusion, and this is according to the president when he came out with his July 4th goal, basically looking at metrics of the people who hadn't been vaccinated yet, specifically in the category of those who were either on the fence or want the vaccine and haven't gotten it yet. Looking at that metric, not the people who are saying there's no way I'm getting it, but the people who still want it, they decided that 70% would be an attainable goal based on that timeline. But it has really nothing to do with the entire country because the CDC and the president aren't controlling the way that each individual state handles the restrictions that are in place. So I'm not saying that these numbers are completely meaningless. I'm wondering if they should all be used to create policy in this area. Charles saying your question about why 70% is, they saying it's myopic, lacking imagination, foresight, or intellectual insight. I've heard that before. It's an attainable goal to do our best to end the pandemic. Businesses closed versus deaths. You've chosen deaths. That's not true at all. We have a vaccine that is readily available right now. Of course, 100% of the population is not going to be able to get the vaccine. But as far as giving people the option to safely open their businesses and provide that business for people who are fully vaccinated and safe from this virus, from spreading this virus, from giving it to other people and killing other people, we have that option now. Reaching for a number that we've kind of made up the rules for just seems a little odd. And I'm not saying one way or another. I just like to know why exactly. I mean, that's all I got to say tonight. If what I just said, you're like, that doesn't make sense, hit me up, email me. The story at kgw.com. Use hashtag HeyDan, use that QR code, whatever you want. I'll talk to you tomorrow.